In the heart of an empire, balanced between peace and chaos, a mother discovers a power long lost to legend. A power so rare it hasn't been seen in 1,000 years. On a night meant for family, the palace falls under siege. Assassins close in, and her children's lives hang by a thread. But when fury and love collide, she awakens as the bridge between worlds, and the darkness beyond the stars begins to stir. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The Celestial Keep stood in the heart of the empire, its towers rising above the glowing city like guardians of the sky. Tonight, the grand hall was warm with light and the sound of quiet laughter. This was not a council meeting or a royal ceremony. This was family night, a tradition Emperor Calor refused to miss, no matter what crisis waited outside. Once every 7th day, the high doors closed to the outside world, and only those who shared the family bond could enter. The hall was an elegant blend of human and Drakari design. Ancient tapestries hung on one wall, woven with scenes of dragon legends, while the opposite wall displayed paintings from distant human worlds. The long table shimmered with polished stone and was fitted with hidden technology to adjust height and warmth for its mixed guests. Above them, stained glass skylights opened to the night, letting the pale light of 2 moons spill across the table's silver settings. Leora sat halfway down the table with her youngest child on her lap. Naira was 3 years old, her wide eyes bright with joy as she reached for a piece of crystallized fruit. When she was calm, her tiny scales along her forearms were almost invisible, but in her excitement, they caught the light in silver flashes. She was a living miracle, born against every expectation, a child of both human and Drakari blood. Eldrin, 15 and restless, sat across from them in a specially designed chair that balanced his strong wing and supported his legs. He was clever, quick with words, and often caught between pride and frustration over his incomplete transformation. He leaned forward with a frown, his voice carrying that familiar tone of an older brother. "Mother, you can't let her eat dessert before the meal. It sets a bad example." Leora raised an eyebrow, reminding him that he had eaten cake for breakfast the previous day. Eldrin's grin returned as he declared that his was victory cake, earned after beating his class rival in advanced navigation. Calor chuckled at the head of the table, dressed in simple clothes instead of imperial robes, his golden eyes softer than usual. In these moments, the weight of leading 7 star systems seemed to rest a little lighter on his shoulders. The family exchanged stories and gentle teasing, the kind of conversation that filled the hall with life. Calor spoke of old Drakari traditions, inventing one on the spot about dragons celebrating victories in mathematics with sweetbread. Eldrin challenged him to prove it, and Naira simply announced cake, as if that settled the matter. As the meal continued, the palace outside remained distant. No council summons could break the protective silence here. Then the hall doors opened. A young attendant entered, his steps careful, carrying a small device. He bowed low, apologizing for the interruption, and explained there was an urgent delivery requiring Leora's immediate signature. Leora frowned. Urgent messages were not allowed during family night unless life or death demanded it. "Who approved this?" she asked. The attendant replied that the council had marked it under emergency protocol. Calor's expression darkened. The council knew better. Before Leora could press further, the attendant's eyes flashed in an unnatural way. His skin rippled and his face began to change. The familiar features dissolved into something alien. Scales shifted like oil over water, colors bending and twisting. A cold instinct seized Leora. She moved without thinking, pulling Naira into her arms and rolling sideways. She shouted for everyone to get down. A burst of fire shot from the creature's mouth, filling the air with scorching heat. Kalar reacted instantly, his body blurring into his full dragon form. Golden scales flared in the light as one massive wing curved protectively over Eldrin, who dropped from his chair and rolled beneath the table with practiced ease. This was not the young attendant. It was something wearing his shape, a mimic, one of the shapeshifters banned from the Empire for centuries. Kalar's roar shook the walls, calling the palace into full lockdown. The heavy doors slammed shut, and security fields activated. But beyond the walls, muffled sounds of chaos reached them. Explosions from other parts of the keep. This was not an isolated attack. The mimic lunged for Leora and Naira. Its twisted form, bending in ways no living creature should. Its jaws split too wide, and its limbs moved with unnatural speed. Leora raised her free hand without knowing why, and the air between them shimmered like heat waves. But instead of warmth, the air felt cold and heavy. The creature froze mid-leap. Time seemed to stop for it alone. Leora stared in shock at the soft blue glow now flowing from her fingers. Naira clung to her neck, silent but trembling. Eldrin's voice broke through the moment. "Mother, what did you just do?" Leora had no answer. She only knew the power had been there all along, waiting. It felt ancient, steady, and utterly certain. She turned her eyes back to the mimic, and the frozen shape shattered like glass. Each fragment dissolved into nothing before it reached the floor. The quiet lasted only a breath. Then, from the broken doors at the far end of the hall, 3 more figures entered. Armored Drakari warriors, their scales painted in the markings of the purest faction. Their leader's voice hissed through the air, "Death to the half-blood child." Leora's arms tightened around Naira. Kalor shifted his stance, ready to strike, but his eyes met hers. She saw the same thought mirrored there. This was no longer just an attack. This was the beginning of something much larger, and it was not over yet. The 3 armored Drakari warriors stood in the broken doorway, their shadows stretching across the banquet hall floor. The glow from the shattered skylight glinted off their scaled armor, each plate painted with the crimson and black marks of the purest faction. Their leader's voice carried the cold certainty of someone who believed they served a righteous cause. "Death to the half-blood child." Leora felt Naira's small hands gripping the fabric of her dress. Every heartbeat pounded in her ears. She stepped back slowly, keeping herself between the warriors and her daughter. Kalar's golden form shifted slightly, one massive wing still shielding Eldrin under the table. The lead warrior took a step forward, his claws scraping the polished stone. "Stand aside, human. This is no quarrel with you." Leora's voice came out steady, though the blue-white light had already begun to glow faintly along her fingertips. "You'll have to go through me." The Drakari warriors laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the chamber. One of them raised a heavy, curved blade. 3 warriors against 1 unarmed human. This will not take long. Dot. The words struck something deep in Leora. It was not fear, it was anger. Not the fleeting anger of insult, but the deep, unshakable fury of a mother defending her child. The glow in her hands spread up her arms like ink swirling through water, tracing patterns that moved on their own. The warriors moved at once. 3 streams of dragon fire erupted toward her, the air distorting with the heat. She raised her hands without thinking. The fire met the blue light and simply vanished. No smoke, no sound, just gone, as if it had never existed. The leader faltered, his eyes narrowing. "Impossible." "That's what they said about my daughter," Leora replied. She stepped forward, the light in her skin brightening until it cast long, cold shadows. The push she made next was not with her hands, but with something else. Something that came from the space between her thoughts and the world itself. It struck the warrior. Stone cracked under the impact. One did not rise again. The other two struggled to their feet, their earlier certainty gone, replaced by a wary fear. One of them whispered the word, as if naming a ghost, Veilbearer. The term sparked a memory. Leora had heard it once, buried in a story Eldrin brought home from his studies. Humans who could touch the space between stars and reality. Warriors who had fought alongside dragons in the oldest wars. But those had been myths. Before she could speak, Calor's deep voice rumbled beside her. "Take the children," he said quickly. "I will hold them off." "No," Leora answered, the word carrying such force that even the warriors paused. "Nobody threatens my children." She passed Naira to Eldrin, who had crawled out from under the table. "Protect your sister," she told him. His eyes were wide, but he nodded, moving to a safe corner. The leader of the remaining warriors straightened, masking his unease with arrogance. "You do not understand the power you play with, human. It will consume you." "Then let's see if it eats you first," Leora said. They attacked again, blades flashing, claws slashing through the air. She did not retreat. Each strike met the glowing barrier that surrounded her. One warrior tried to leap behind her, but the space folded in a way that made him land exactly where he had started. Leora moved faster than she thought possible, her steps carrying her forward as if the floor itself obeyed her will. She reached out, and the space between her and the nearest attacker simply vanished. Her hand closed around his throat in a blink. "I can feel it," she said quietly, almost to herself. "The emptiness between what you are and what you think you are. I could break it apart until nothing is left." The warrior's eyes widened with real fear. "But I won't," she continued, releasing him. He stumbled back, gasping. "Because I protect life. I don't destroy it unless I have to." The two surviving warriors exchanged a glance, then backed toward the ruined doorway. Fear had overtaken their cause. In the next breath, they were gone, their retreat echoing down the hall. Silence returned, broken only by the faint hum of the lockdown fields. Leora turned to her children. Eldrin was staring at her as if seeing her for the first time, his face caught between awe and pride. Naira reached for her, her little fingers brushing against Leora's glowing skin. "Mama pretty," Naira said softly. Calor shifted back to his humanoid form, his golden eyes searching hers. "Leora, your eyes." She blinked. "What about them?" He pulled a small device from his belt and activated its reflective screen. She gasped. Her once dark eyes were now the color of deep space, with points of light like distant stars. One of the palace guards, older than most had ever lived, dropped to one knee. "The Veilbearer has awakened," he said in a voice filled with reverence. Others followed his lead, bowing even if they did not fully understand. Leora shook her head, uncomfortable with the display. "I'm still just Leora." The old guard met her gaze. "No, my lady. You are the bridge between worlds, and the first in 1,000 years to carry the starlit veil." Leora felt the weight of those words settle over her. She looked toward her children. She had not asked for this power, but now that it had awakened, she knew she would use it. Not for politics, not for conquest. She would use it for them. News of the Veilbearer's awakening spread across the empire before dawn. By the time the suns rose over the capital, every corner of the celestial keep hummed with whispers. In markets and council halls, in military outposts and distant colonies, people repeated the same words. Leora, the human consort of Emperor Calor, had revealed a power not seen in 1,000 years. The great chamber of the High Council was already filled when Leora entered beside Cal. The tall arches above them held carvings of dragons and humans locked in battle, reminders of a time before peace. Now the chamber's air was heavy, thick with both curiosity and unease. Council members shifted in their seats as she walked to the center platform. Calor took his place at her side, his presence commanding silence. Scorvain, a long-serving council elder, rose first. His voice was careful, but edged with suspicion. A veil-bearer has not been recorded in living memory. Some say their coming is a sign of great change, others of great danger. Leora met his gaze without flinching. Danger has already come. Last night, assassins entered the palace to kill my daughter. They came because she is half human and half Drakari. If you believe my power is the danger, then you have not been paying attention. A murmur rippled through the council seats. The purest faction has been disavowed. Another member spoke quickly. They do not speak for the Empire. Leora's voice sharpened. How many of you have whispered that my daughter is an abomination? How many have doubted Eldrin's worth because his transformation is incomplete? You may not have raised a blade against them, but your silence is no different. There was no answer. The chamber was still. I didn't ask for this power, she continued, and I don't yet understand it fully. But I will learn. I will master it, and I will use it to protect my family and anyone else in this empire who needs protection. Human, Drakari, or anything between. I will stand between them and any threat, whether it comes from outside or from within this room. Her words hung in the air. Calor stepped forward, his voice firm. The Empire stands with its veil-bearer, as it did in the ancient times, as it will again. One by one, the council members bowed, even those who moments before had looked doubtful. When the session ended, Leora walked the long corridors of the keep in silence. Calor stayed close, but gave her space. Outside the council chamber, life moved as it always had. But she knew the truth. Everything had changed. Later that day, in a quiet room high in the East Tower, Leora sat before a table covered in crystal storage units. The Imperial Archivist, Mistress Oral, placed the last of them before her. These are the Veil-bearer texts, Oral said softly. Sealed for over a millennium. The Emperor ordered them opened for you. Leora reached out, and the first crystal flared to life at her touch. Words appeared in the air in a language she had never studied, yet she understood them instantly. They spoke of walking the line between stars, of bending the threads of reality, of guarding the living from what waits in the dark spaces between. Training began the next morning. She learned to step through walls by folding the space ahead of her. She learned to create pockets of stillness where no energy could enter. She could shape gravity to lift an object gently or hold a foe in place. Each day brought new understanding, and each day the glow beneath her skin felt more natural. But the most unexpected moment came when Eldrin joined her in the training chamber. He had been working on his transformation, holding his humanoid form for longer stretches, but the strain was clear in his eyes. It hurts, he admitted quietly. Like my body can't decide when it's supposed to be. Leora studied him with her new senses, seeing not just his shape, but the way his human and Drakari natures moved within him. They were not fighting, they were searching for a bridge. Let me try something, she said. Placing her hands on his shoulders, she let the light flow from her into him, not to change him, but to show his body the connection it had been missing. The shift was almost immediate. Eldrin's posture straightened, his legs and wings perfectly balanced, his form steady. He turned to the mirror. I'm whole, he whispered. You've always been whole, Leora told him, pulling him into a tight embrace. The transformation lasted only minutes before fading, but it was enough. Enough to prove it was possible, enough to give him hope. Later, Naira toddled into the chamber, dragging her favorite cloth dragon. "Mama, make me fly," she demanded with a grin. Leora laughed, lifting her with a gentle pull of gravity until her feet left the floor. Naira giggled, scales flashing in rainbow shades. Kalar stood in the doorway, watching them. "Our daughter will be fearsome when she grows up," he said. "Good," Leora replied. "The galaxy needs more who protect what they love." That night, alone in the study, Leora returned to the Veilbearer texts. The crystal before her pulsed with light, revealing a passage she had not seen before. The words were simple but heavy. "When the Veilbearer rises, the silence between stars stirs. The eternal enemy will wake." She read it twice, her stomach tightening. In the morning, she showed it to Kalar. His expression darkened as he summoned the elder guard, Korin. The old dragon's voice was grave. "The Devourers. They are why the Veilbearers were created. Beings of pure hunger that live in the spaces between realities. If they wake, they will consume all life." "How long do we have?" Leora asked. "A year, perhaps less," Korin said. "Your awakening will have drawn their attention." Kalar's answer was immediate. "Then we prepare, together." Leora looked toward the balcony where their children were playing under the watch of loyal guards. She knew one truth as clearly as the light beneath her skin. She had been given this power for a reason, and she would not let the darkness take what she loved. The sky over the capital glowed with the first light of dawn. From the highest balcony of the Celestial Keep, Leora stood with Kalar, watching the faint stars fade into the warmth of day. Below, the city moved slowly to life, unaware of the full weight of what the council had learned. Inside, the air of the keep had changed. Guards moved with greater urgency. The hum of shield generators ran constantly, and in the minds of those who knew the truth, there was only one thought. The Devourers were coming. Kalar's voice was low. "We have less than a year, perhaps much less. They will follow the echo of your awakening. They will not stop." Leora kept her eyes on the horizon. "Then we give them something to find that they can't destroy." The days that followed became a blur of preparation. Human engineers worked alongside Drakari smiths to forge new defenses. Fleets patrolled the space beyond the outer colonies. The Empire's scattered worlds began sending their finest warriors to train under Kalar's command. Leora trained every day in the East Tower chambers, guided by the Veilbearer texts and her own growing instincts. She learned to open small portals across the row, step through them, and close them before an opponent could react. She learned to create spheres of null space, where no fire or weapon could pass. Most of all, she learned to reach out with her senses, feeling the subtle threads that connected every living thing. One evening, she found Eldrin in the training room, working alone. His brow was damp with sweat, his form flickering between human and dragon shapes. She stepped forward and placed her hands on his shoulders, letting her light find the bridge within him. His form steadied, and he exhaled in relief. "One day, you won't need me to do this," she told him. "I don't mind needing you," he said with a small smile, "but I'll be ready when the Devourers come." Naira was less interested in training and more in the wonder of her mother's abilities. She would follow Leora around the chambers, asking for small shows of power, floating marbles, shapes of light, gentle breezes that carried the scent of the gardens. Late one night, Mistress Aurel came to the balcony where Leora sat. Behind her, servants carried in more star-etched codices from the deepest vaults. "These are from the sealed vault of echoes," Aurel explained. "They were locked away even from the last veil-bearer. When Leora touched the first, the crystal flared and words formed in the air. She read them slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. In the time of joining and sundering, when light meets shadow and refuses to break, the harbinger of union will rise. Not to conquer, but to bind. Not to end, but to transform." Aurel's eyes shone with quiet awe. "You are not only the first veil-bearer in a millennium, you are the one foretold to unite what has never been united." Leora felt the weight of the prophecy press into her. But she also felt something else, a sense of clarity. The preparations intensified. Calor commanded the military. Leora traveled to outlying worlds to speak with leaders and healers, earning their trust. Slowly, walls of suspicion between human and Drakari communities began to crumble. Still, the shadow in the stars grew closer. One night, Leora awoke to find Calor standing at the window, staring into the sky. "You feel it too," she said. "Yes," he replied, "a stirring, something vast, just beyond the reach of our sight." They stood in silence until dawn, knowing it was not imagination. When the first signs came, a flicker in the outer patrol beacons, a sudden collapse of a mining station's power field, the council met in emergency session. Reports spoke of empty husks where once there had been thriving colonies. No fire, no debris, just silence. "They're feeding," Corin said gravely, "and they're getting closer." The Empire moved into high alert. Families were evacuated from vulnerable worlds. Fleets gathered at strategic points. In the palace, Leora stayed close to her children, though she continued to train every hour she could spare. On the eve of the first expected encounter, Leora stood once more on the balcony, Naira asleep in her arms. Eldrin leaned against the railing beside her, his face older in the pale light. Calor joined them, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. "Whatever comes," Calor said, "we face it together." Leora looked at the two of them, then at the dark sky. She thought of the prophecies, of the devourers, of the bridge she had become between two worlds. She knew the battle ahead would test them in ways none of them could yet see. But she also knew this: she had found her place, no longer between worlds, no longer searching for where she belonged. She was exactly where she was meant to be. As the first stars of night appeared, she whispered a vow into the quiet air. "I will stand in the space between and let no darkness pass." Far beyond the horizon, unseen to the people of the Empire, something stirred in the black between galaxies. And somewhere in that cold, endless dark, the shadow in the stars began to move.